That's right, you probably saw the title of this video. I did indeed learn 100 jazz standards in 1 year, in one point of my life. And while I wouldn't necessarily advocate learning that many jazz standards so quickly to any of my students, the important thing is learning lots of jazz standards will help you learn all the musical lessons you need to know about jazz and learning how to improvise over jazz standards. So in today's video, I'd like to share some of the lessons that I learned from learning 100 tunes and how we can learn jazz standards better and get more out of them. That's coming right up. What's up, Brent here from LearnJazzStandards.com, which is a blog, a podcast, and videos all geared towards helping you become a better jazz musician. Make sure you subscribe at the button below and hit the bell notification button in case you've never done that before. Now, back when I was finishing up high school, the thing that I really wanted to do was to become a jazz musician. And what seemed to be the socially acceptable thing at the time was to go to music school. So that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I ended up doing. However, in between high school and college, I actually stayed back for a year and studied with a teacher who set up a program for me. And one of the things I was supposed to do in this program was learn 100 new jazz standards in a year. And needless to say, that is a ton of jazz standards to learn. And like I said, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for someone doing this. However, I had a lot of time on my hands, and therefore I could be very diligent and work really hard towards my jazz and musical goals. But through learning so many jazz standards and having to learn at least 2 new ones per week, I learned a lot of things about how to learn them the most efficiently and how to memorize them and how to move through them quickly but still get a lot out of them. So I'm going to share with you 4 tips that I learned through learning 100 jazz standards in 1 year. Now, the first tip, and I would say is one of the more powerful tips, is to only learn jazz standards that you really like. Now, sometimes we're forced to learn tunes that maybe we're not that excited about because you heard it at a jam session or someone wants to play it on a gig. However, the ones that I latched onto, learned the quickest, and kept in my head for the long term were the ones that I was genuinely excited about learning. So I would suggest making a list of all the tunes that you really want to learn and you think are really awesome, and learn those ones before anything else, unless, of course, you have to for a particular situation. By doing this, you're going to learn it quicker and it will stick for the long term. Now, something that I did religiously during this year is I listened obsessively to the tunes I was listening to. So I would take just one jazz standard, find as many different versions of that tune as possible, put it on a playlist, and just go everywhere with it. You know, in my car, on my commutes, at home, on walks around my neighborhood. I would just be always listening to that jazz standard. And by doing this, the melody was sinking into my subconscious, the chords were, everything, so that by the time I got to my instrument, it was exponentially more easy to learn that tune because I was already so familiar with it. And by the way, this is the L in my list process for learning jazz standards by ear, which is how I suggest learning jazz standards. So I'll be sure to link to that video at the end of this video for you to check that whole process out. But the L stands for listen, and the second I stands for internalize, which is really what I was doing there. So make sure that you're listening obsessively to the tunes all the time, and it's really going to help you learn them quicker and more efficiently. Now, as I started learning a lot of jazz standards and getting to 10 and then 20 and then 30, I started to recognize that there were a lot of patterns in the jazz standards I was learning, that a lot of the harmonic information was the same, maybe just slightly different and in different orders, but a lot of it was familiar territory. Take, for example, the move to the 4 chord. So maybe a 2-5-1 to the 1 chord and then going to a 2-5-1 to the 4 chord, or going to the relative minor. You start recognizing these patterns that come up. And so analyzing jazz standards is really helpful to do for understanding them more. And the more of these jazz standards you learn, you'll see these patterns come up. So be sure to start recognizing the harmonic movements in the jazz standards you're learning, because they're going to translate to all of the other ones, many of the other ones. So the more jazz standards you learn, the easier it ultimately gets to learn more of them, because you're simply familiar with the harmony and the melodic context as they come about. Now, last but not least, this entire year, I was very fortunate to have one steady gig every single Monday night at, one of the nicer establishments in the town that I grew up in. and I was able to play these tunes all the time with a friend. So I had somebody else I was playing these tunes with. I was playing them in a live situation. So it wasn't just me in my practice room, learning all these tunes and then never putting them to use. I was constantly adding them to my repertoire and constantly playing them out. And by doing this is really what allowed me to internalize them. This is what really allowed me to get familiar with them so that I could become a proficient improviser over them. So one of the biggest tips I can give to you is to simply play them out, whether it's at a jam session with one friend, two friends, three friends, at a gig, as much as you possibly can, because the more you do that, the more familiar you're going to get with them. The more familiar you get with the harmony, the easier other jazz standards are to learn, and you won't forget them. Because honestly, like I said, I wouldn't suggest learning 100 jazz standards in a year, but in order for me to actually retain some of those, I had to really be playing them all the time, because my teacher at the end of the year would literally test me and say, play this tune, or play this tune, or play this tune, and I just had to recall them. That was kind of the big test. And this really boosted my chops and really helped me retain information better and improve my ears. To this day, if I am at a gig and I don't know a tune, there's a good chance that I can pick up on at least a good amount of the harmony going on, granted that it's pretty traditional jazz harmony. So those are just some of the things that I learned from learning 100 jazz standards in 1 year. But what I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments down below is, what kind of tips can you offer for learning jazz standards quicker and memorizing them better? Feel free to leave your comments and your input down below so we can all learn from one another. Now, like I said, my list process for learning jazz standards is a great video that can really help you out if you're just trying to learn jazz standards even more efficiently, and a good process to do so. So I'll leave that video right over here. And if you're interested in analyzing jazz standards more, then I would definitely check out my jazz standards playbook up here. That will really help you learn jazz standards better and understand what's actually happening in them. All right, that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you smash that like button, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.